All right, everybody, welcome back to Real Talk Unfiltered. Our host, our fearless leaders, is being a leader somewhere else this week with the Army Reserves. He's probably doing absolutely nothing with it.
They do nothing.
He's doing nothing. But got Chris here for a fill-in. They look very similar, just a little thicker beard, that's all. And shorter. That's it.
And chunkier.
I didn't say that. I did not say that. But all right, so we wanted to kind of talk about, hurricane season started. This is throughout the whole United States, kind of thing. So being in South Florida, just Florida in general, we kind of puts a lot of dampers on, binding insurance policies, closing on your mortgages, just closing on your house in general. So it's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. So Chris, what are some big issues that come up with, if there's a name policy, what kind of happens, or name policy, name storm?
Yeah.
What you always got a name policy.
And name policy.
Yeah. What happens then?
Yeah. So it usually about a week or 2 weeks out, we usually kind of get an idea of, if it's heading for us or not. And as that thing gets closer, there's more and more emphasis put on binding policies right away because the carriers typically will shut down. So the closer that storm gets, usually once the tropical storm warning or hurricane watch has been issued, that's typically when you're going to start seeing home insurance companies and car insurance companies freezing any kind of movement with policies. You're not going to be able to bind new coverage. You're not going to be able to endorse coverage. You pretty much got to sit tight until that storm passes with what you have. So you want to really pay attention, to the weather forecast. We all become. I basically become a weatherman during hurricane season. It's kind of funny. You'll see a lot of my social media posts turn to me sharing a lot of weather related stuff and me posting about different things and what's about to happen and whatnot. So it's kind of funny, that I have to wear that hat, to be honest. But we got to pay close attention to that because they do start shutting down. And the biggest problem that you see, and you've seen this, when you're a week, 2 weeks away from closing, or even 3 weeks, 4 weeks away from closing, and this happens, these carriers shut down because of the storm coming. It can actually delay you longer than just a week. Just because the storm passes in a few days doesn't mean that the carriers are going to start writing again. So they're going to take time after that storm passes to assess all the damage and assess what they're looking at as far as a claims situation, catastrophic claim situation. And they're going to sit tight on not letting us bind new policies. So if you're, 30 days away from closing on a property, you want to get that binder in before that storm shuts down, the ability to finalize policies. We saw it with Hurricane Ian. One of the carriers actually shut down, I think right around a week or a couple days leading up to the storm. And I wasn't able to bind new coverage with that carrier for over a month. Wow. So it was tough, especially I had a lot of new construction properties going on up in Central Florida that we just had to sit and wait. Luckily it's new construction, so they're waiting for the properties to be built, so they're not in a big rush per se. But either way, you're looking at over a month's time for that carrier to actually assess all the damage that happened from that storm.
We see it, on the mortgage side too. Like if the house that we're closing on is in, basically what FEMA says, like, hey, this is the zone for it. Once it passes, like these are the damaged zones or counties or areas, the geocode, that we have to have the appraiser go back out there and reassess everything.
Yeah, and you can be looking at. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Like you can, that could delay your closing. When can they get back out there? Part of it, because they're doing the regular appraisals. Now they got these appraisals added on top. Contract wise, the contract already pushes it through. If you have a general, Florida bar contract out there, it already is going to automatically let it push through until somebody can take care of it. But you thought you were closing on a Friday, though a storm was coming through, you might be pushed out, a week, 2 weeks, and then God forbid there's damage. Now that seller has to get that fixed either through their insurance company or themselves. because the buyer bought that property as is, even though as is, but it was as is when the contract was signed.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because that's pretty important. When a storm does come through and you're put on hold, and pushed back that closing date because of the storm, you have to wait for that storm to pass. You have your appraisal that has to be redone. You have to pay attention to if there's damage to the home now, right? And on top of that, and because there could be potential damage, the new insurance policy from your buyer might be required to get another inspection done prior to the closing to make sure there is no damage before they go to insure it, because they don't want to be on the hook for damage that occurred prior to them, taking ownership or taking, insuring
that property.
Insuring the property. So that's a big piece to it. That we see a lot too, and that delays a lot of things. So that's what I tell everybody. When June 1st hits, that's the start of hurricane season. It goes all the way to the end of November. It's pretty much the entire year. I mean, it's 6 months, but I mean, it's 5 months, but it feels like it's the entire portion of our year.
There's only 3 times in Florida. It's hurricane season. Just got out of hurricane season. You're preparing for hurricane season.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So it's a struggle, but I mean, when, the best thing you can ever do is just be as prepared as possible for it. And when you have closings lined up for June, July, August, September, especially September, October, I think those are our heaviest months typically. It's where we see most of the action hit when it comes to hurricanes is later in that summer months, going into fall. But if you have closings lined up, you just want to be on top of your game and just make sure that if you're within 30 days or as soon as that 30-day mark hits from your potential closing date, get that insurance bound and just have it ready to go. Because you can always update the effective date. You can always change, those things prior to the closing if you need, if the dates change or what have you. But
or what if the storm passes and doesn't hit anything, and now you're still, you might have been good. Your house was good. It's not in that geocode and it's ready to close. But since you didn't bind that insurance policy, you're still waiting for that company to reopen to do
Exactly.
that.
I had it happen.
You're being forced to go to a different insurance company, which could be higher.
Right.
Because then the seller could force your hand on that. Like, hey, you can afford the higher one. You got to do it. And we have to close.
Right. Because you agreed to purchase on those dates. So, I mean, you got to make it happen.
Yeah.
So
once it's cleared that zone, then you have to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot. I mean, like last year it was, with Ian and everything, I had everybody calling me at the last minute wanting, bind the policy. The storm's, going to hit us in 2 days. And it's like, we knew the storm was going to hit us 4 days ago, a week ago. We knew it was coming a week and a half ago. So, that kind of stuff should have been done. But, I don't know how your process is, so I can't really speak to that, on the lending side or on the real estate side. But the biggest thing that happens is people will just wait way too long to request that binder. Or just even to start the insurance search to begin with. So get that stuff done as fast as possible. As soon as you go under contract and you have an inspection date, request the quotes, start requesting the quotes. We can get the inspections afterwards. We can get a ballpark idea, up front without the inspections. And then when the inspections come in, we can validate our
you can at least give them like, hey, best case scenario, worst case scenario.
Exactly. So you're going to fall anywhere in between there.
Yeah.
And then
here's if you get the inspections were great, this is where you're going to get. Horrible, this is what you're going to get.
Right.
And then once those inspections come, and then generally, I mean, once they do the inspection, most reputable inspection companies are giving that report same day, if not 24 hours.
Yeah.
So they should have it pretty quickly on that end.
Yeah, it typically comes pretty quick.
You were talking about Ian, and I know like Ian's will want to push through Orlando too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you don't think like, okay, I'm in the middle of the state. I mean, Florida's skinny in that part, but is there a big difference at all for what's happening with like if a hurricane is being named? Does it matter where, when they do, of course, they do that that cone of what uncertainty or whatever
The
that
cone
comes
of
out,
uncertainty.
that like it always covers the whole state. So is it just
Right.
when they're in that cone, or is it just basically that named storm and then it's the whole state's locked down?
No, so I mean, yeah, that's a big thing too, because that cone of you see that cone of uncertainty, and most of us look at that as that's where the storm's going to stay within. So the outer walls will be roughly around that, so it's going to track somewhere in there. But most people don't realize that's where the center of the eye of the storm will actually sway. It could either go that far left or that far right, which means the storm is much wider than that, and therefore will cover more ground. So when these insurance companies, a lot of these insurance companies, what they're doing or what they're starting to do is they're actually starting to shut down the entire state for coverage versus just that particular area because of the uncertainty of where that storm could move. We saw it with a few storms. I think like Charlie did like a weird loop-de-loo and made a bunch of changes, So
I mean, even it was Ian like bounced along the coast and suddenly it was like, all right, I'm taking a right turn.
Now I'm going, exactly. So whether it's just
until Disney wasn't, not Disney, but Orlando wasn't prepared for it,
right?
Because it suddenly took that right turn. I mean, we went up there as a family, maybe 2 or 3 days after, because you couldn't really do much down here. So we went up there, and I mean, like everything was flooded. I've never seen, it rains a lot in South Florida, but it was, good 2 or 3 inches everywhere.
Right, and that's a big thing too, is when we think of hurricane storms, you're only thinking of like, all right, wind damage, roof damage, and so on. But a lot of these storms, especially lately, we saw it with Dorian. What was it, 2019 or 2020 or something like that? I forget what year Dorian was, but he just sat over the Bahamas. And that storm was massive. If that thing didn't sit over the Bahamas and sat over anywhere on Florida, the amount, I mean, look at the amount of devastation it did in the Bahamas. Obviously, it's a lot weaker construction, I believe, but even so, the amount of flooding that it caused. And the thing that people need to know is your home insurance policy doesn't cover for flood, even if it comes during a hurricane. It's completely different. It's a completely separate policy. So everything that happened with Hurricane Ian, or a lot of what happened with Hurricane Ian, was it caused a lot of storm surge. It caused a lot of flooding in a lot of areas. So you had to have a flood insurance policy in order to have coverage for that. Otherwise, you're going to FEMA to ask for a loan, because that's all it really is. When people go to FEMA, they're like, oh, I'll just call FEMA and get coverage. Well, it's not coverage. It's just a loan, and you have to pay it back with interest. So the cost of flood insurance.
So you're saying the government's not giving us anything free?
No, no. Okay. No, nothing's free. Come on now. So, that's a huge thing. It's a huge misunderstanding, is that people are just like, oh, I'll call FEMA afterwards. And it's like, all right, well, now you have a loan with interest that you have to pay back. It's not just a gift. And a lot of times they're denying coverage. They're denying you that loan. So you got to be really, prepared for something like this to happen. I had a customer, and I think I mentioned this on the last podcast we were on, but he called me in the next day or 2 days afterwards, saying that he had to leave his house at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, carrying his dogs and his kids above the water. There's 5 feet of water in his house. He fought me on getting insurance to begin with, and then he ended up, going with it. And he's like, thank God we did, because $98,000 worth of damage to his home.
Now, let's say I'm closing tomorrow, the 14th. Does the flood start? Because if I'm buying a new house, does the flood insurance start basically the month after? Or since I'm buying it, is it when I bind it or when the effective date starts? How does that work? Because I know there's a 30-day delay, but.
Well, so it depends on the policy you get, right? There's 2 different types of flood insurance policies. There's the private market and there's the National Flood Insurance Program. The National Flood Insurance Program, you can bind the policy effective your closing date if it's a new purchase. If you already own the home and you don't have flood insurance already, there's going to be a 30-day waiting period through the National Flood Insurance Program. However, if you go through the private flood insurance market, some of them have a no waiting period. Some of them have 8 days, 14 days, and some of them will do 30 days as well. So it just depends on the carrier you go to and what your scenario is. If you're purchasing a home and you have the debt to income ratio that'll allow you to spend a little extra money on flood insurance, and that's not going to mess anything up, then you get that done up front and have it scheduled for effective the closing date. Otherwise, you can call the day of the closing after closing's done and just make that payment. I don't think it'll affect anything, right? And you can comment on that. I don't know if I'm giving bad advice there or not, but
No.
typically once it's closed, they're not gonna look at your financials again, right? So
no, yeah. So you can add that policy on,
right.
and usually flood. If we don't require it on our end, it's the policy solely up to the buyer and the borrower. Because it's usually, if we're not requiring it, it's $600-700 for the year. If that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
if
Yeah,
that. A lot of times we're looking at like 480, 300 and change.
yeah.
So
So if we're not in a flood zone and we're not requiring it on the mortgage side, then it's good. Which it's good. I think, was it a year ago, 2 years ago, where I want to say Fannie and Freddie came out and said, like, you don't have to go with the national coverage anymore. You can go private, where you weren't allowed to do that. If you were required to have flood insurance, you had to go through the national side of it. And now you're able to fight that.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So you used to be able to, used to be required to go through National Flood Insurance Program because of, FHA loans. The government-backed loans weren't accepting the private markets. I believe it was their ratings and the way they were rated, and that they're they're obviously different, right? So they're not backed by FEMA and so on. So those government-backed programs, those government-backed loans, they wanted that security of FEMA backing the policy. Well, there's a lot of problems going on with that right now. There's a lot of issues with them having to extend and get more funds for those programs. So I believe they opened up, because of that, they opened up to the private markets. And the private markets are backed by large reinsurers, very large companies, Lloyd's of London type of backing. So there's not really a fear on our side in the insurance world. We're not really fearful of them necessarily going under or just vanishing out of nowhere. So you could potentially get the private market flood for a lot less money than the National Flood Insurance Program. And on top of that, they provide a lot more coverage. So
Okay.
you can get a lot more out of that policy than you could the NFIP. But now, because it's accepted by the FHAs and the VA loans and the USDA loans, it just makes it that much more accessible and helps with debt to income ratios, because the costs are typically a lot lower. So
exactly. Usually somebody's required flood insurance. I mean, if they're going FHA, not saying that every FHA is the same, but they're usually kind of pushing that debt to income ratio, not all the time. But once they start doing that, like, you're like, oh, we're required to flood. Like, that could be suddenly almost their insurance that we are calculating a month just for regular home insurance is almost going to double at times. So we're thinking that they're going to be required flood. So now that we go to private, it's definitely a lot better.
Well, and there's another piece to this too, with the recent legislation that changed regarding citizens requiring flood. You used to, this is something that everybody's going to have to kind of pay attention to now, is that when there was a high debt to income ratio, we would look at, getting the price for the flood as low as we possibly could. And a lot of times the borrower would elect to reduce or remove their contents coverage altogether. And that would usually offset enough, and that would be a big price difference. However, now with the Citizens requirements, if the home insurance is with Citizens, we're not going to be able to reduce or remove the contents coverage. It has to match the coverage on the Citizens policy.
Gotcha.
With the dwelling coverage, it would have to match or be at the maximum of the 250,000 that the NFIP allows. So,
and then, as you've been saying, I mean, like, Citizens isn't there to give you the best insurance. It's just there as your last option. I know you kind of preach on it, like that's why they're making these harder and harder on the consumer, is because they're trying to get people out of that policy and make the private market better.
Right. I mean, it stinks, right? Because we have situations where the private market might be offering a policy, but their policy is probably $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 more expensive. And that's why we end up going, because it's not as affordable as what Citizens might offer.
Are you seeing with the changes, at least going into the insurance, like, I feel like I've been seeing less and less I mean, you couldn't get more citizens because everything was citizens basically. I'm seeing less policies come in that are citizens now. Are you kind of starting to see the other companies start to
Some
take a step
companies
forward in it?
some companies have kind of opened their guidelines a little bit. I think a lot of it's situational.
Is
Yeah,
it? Okay.
yeah, based on location, based on the age, based on the, how old or new the roof is. Those all have a lot of impact on that. But some companies did open up. For instance, like, one of my carriers, Southern Oak, they're actually taking homes back to 1980 construction in Miami,
Oh wow.
which is, crazy. I don't know if I haven't really I haven't done anything with that down there, but they're accepting it now, right? So some of them are opening up in Central Florida. They're going, a little bit older. They're, it's probably just little pockets of different carriers that are doing different things just because, I mean, the laws did change, but I don't think there's really anything for them to go off of that. They're just going to open the doors and make the rates better. I think our rates are going to be better once we go through another hurricane season where we do have landfall,
Yeah.
and carriers can kind of gauge how that works. But we're not going to see the existing companies that we have. We're not going to see them lower rates. We're going to see
Gotcha.
new companies come in with slightly better rates, and that's how they're going to kind of stabilize things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a natural competitiveness then. Now, kind of a myth, and I don't know if it's how true it is I've heard that okay, a hurricane comes in is I've always, I'm not from Florida, and the part of Texas I'm from, the hurricane got to you was 4 hours from the coast, so you were pretty good. Just a thunderstorm then. So, but it was like if you had shutters and stuff, like when you put them up, take pictures that you have them up because insurance companies were saying, "Oh, you didn't have your shutters up, and that's why you had this damage. So therefore, it's on you and not them." Heard that a lot. So is that a myth? Is that half truth? What is that?
It's tough to say, to be honest, because every carrier is going to probably respond to it differently.
Okay.
That's probably more of a claim adjuster's question, but from what I've discussed in with some of the carriers that I've discussed this with, the response has been more along the lines of if they can prove that you didn't put your hurricane shutters up, you'd be looking at not so much less coverage, but they're going to remove your discount from the policy
Okay.
at that point. That's been some of the carriers that I've talked to. I can't speak for every carriers. Like I said, every carrier might react to that differently. Some of them I could see standing down, standing their ground, putting their foot down and go, well, you have a duty. I mean, as a homeowner, your agreement, you're signing a contract when you sign that policy. That's a contract between you and the insurance company. And they have duties to respond to claims, but you also have a duty of preventing damage and preventing further damage from happening. So that could be a grounds for them saying, hey, you didn't do your part, of this agreement.
So put the shutters up and take a picture.
So totally put the shutters up. I don't
Just in
know.
case.
I don't think it's necessary to take pictures of it, honestly.
I would assume if it's a bad enough storm coming in that
They can
it's gonna be
tell.
obvious. Yeah.
They can tell, if that thing got ripped out of the wall, it's screwed in or it has bolts on them, and they'll be able to tell that there's damage from it per se. So I don't know if it's necessary to take pictures of that kind of stuff, but if you are going to take pictures of anything, you should be taking pictures of all your belongings inside the home.
Okay.
So a lot of times people don't have before pictures, they just have the after. So you want to show the condition that your belongings were in prior to the damage so that you can get a fair assessment from the adjuster to say, hey, yeah, we've had it for this long, but it's been in great condition, or, whatever the case is, or just inventory, because things get damaged, things get lost. You're just throwing stuff away at that point when there's massive damage. I have a friend that she had her home flooded from Fort Lauderdale. She lives in Fort Lauderdale. And when that storm hit and Fort Lauderdale airport was flooded, her home was one of the ones that got flooded as well. She's right outside the airport and completely destroyed, posted pictures online of just all the rubbish, everything that she just had to toss. And, when things get damaged like that, it's probably you're in more of a hurry to kind of get back to your normal than I think you are to kind of keep track of inventory and what you had and how much you owed, are you owed from the
Yeah.
insurance policy. So it's always really good just to either walk through the house with a video, go into every room, look at everything. If you really want to get technical, you can write down serial numbers of all the electronics and everything like that. But just keep an inventory of some kind, pictures, video, because you're not going to remember when someone goes, well, did you have this? Did you have that? How much did you have for this? You're not going to remember in that kind of stress, in that stressful moment. You're not going to remember what you have, how much you have. You're just gonna be like, I don't know. I had a couch, I had a TV. I don't remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I always tell everybody, hey, take pictures, take video if you can, just do a walkthrough. I do it for my house. I take pictures. I walk outside, I take pictures of the entire house, all the way around, and then I go inside and I take pictures and I do some video walking through the rooms just to solidify what I'm saying that I have if I need to use that.
Just don't lose your cell phone in a storm.
Don't lose your cell phone. That would, I mean, obviously back those things up to the cloud. That's
Where's
probably
the cloud?
the way.
Where's the cloud?
Yeah, where's the cloud?
Gotcha. All right, yeah. I mean, so this is a good discussion. I mean, we're in here. I mean, people that are moving out of state coming down here. I mean, most people know that there was a mad rush to come to Florida the last couple of years, and it's not as crazy as it was, but it's still people coming in. So they were hit with these hurricanes that they never heard of. So before we end it, what is, besides the pictures, just personal experience, what are some things that you tell people to kind of be prepared? I'll kind of go first. It's like bottle water. Like if you know a storm might be coming, get it.
Yeah, everything
Because
but Dasani.
yeah, that one will stay.
That one's gonna stay. People will buy soda before they buy Dasani.
Yeah, they do. But water, bottled water, when it's a day or two out from the storm, it's gone. You're not finding
too
it
late.
at all. Gas gone.
Mhm.
And so I tell people, like, if you think it's coming, it's like that's when you should probably fill up. Grab a couple of cases of water because you're probably going to drink it. You're going to use the gas if the storm passes anyways and misses you. You're going to drink the water if it passes. So there's just some good things. What are some things that you do as a family with it?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much that. I mean, we try to get batteries, flashlights, make sure that all the flashlights are working. Usually that's like beginning of June thing, right? We go through, I just make sure all my flashlights are actually capable of working. They're not, corroded or anything like that. Cases of water, like you said. Radio is a good thing to have. A lot of people don't have those anymore. Being able to listen to the storm, make sure it passed before you start going outside and trying to clean up. So you're aware of where everything is. Because at the same token, yeah, you have a cell phone, but phone lines will most likely be down. Cell service will be down, depending on the area that you're in. And who knows how long it's going to take to get that back up. They've gotten better at getting those back up quickly, but all it takes is one big storm that we're not expecting. And
yeah, I mean,
we're back to square one.
They're pretty good at staging stuff beforehand.
Right. They've gotten, we've had a lot of big storms come through, so they've gotten prepared. They've gone through oh crap, prepare for this. And now they're like, okay, we're going to prepare for something bigger. So, those are probably some of the bigger things, but if you're getting gas, if you're using a generator, check your generator beforehand, make sure that's operational, but be very careful with your generator. If you have to use it, a lot of people end up dying from, carbon monoxide because they enclose it, they put it in the garage, they shut the garage, they leave the garage door to the house open. And, people end up dying every year. Somebody dies from something like that. And just be very, very careful. Some houses out here actually have those hookups to the outside, direct to the generator. And those can be dangerous too, but not necessarily for you as the homeowner, but it can be dangerous for the lineman if that thing backfeeds. So you got to be very careful with how that's set up and make sure you know how to use that. Because if you don't do it properly, you could end up killing somebody, and they can trace it back to you from what I understand. So you got to be very, very careful with generators. That's a big one.
It is. I see that a lot. Like you said, put it outside the garage, run the wires, extension cords through the house, power the necessity kind of things.
Yeah. Maybe get a chain, and chain that thing to something, because the reason people don't necessarily put it outside is because they're worried someone's going to steal it.
Yeah.
And mayhem happens when people are freaked out about stuff and don't prepare. So you just got to be very, very careful with those. And placement is very key. Make sure that exhaust is going outside, not inside the home.
I think that's kind of a good thing to wrap it up on is just be prepared. If a hurricane looks like it's coming to us and you're in the middle of changing insurance, purchasing a home, like you got to be prepared to bind that right away. If it's, God forbid hits us, it's going to delay closing. It's going to delay your insurance. We have to realize how, there's not much we could do on that end besides preparing beforehand kind of thing and then dealing with it as it comes. And then of course, be prepared once it's here.
Mhm.
The water, the gas, making sure the generator's outside. But so that's kind of the key takeaway with everything is just prepare yourself for it. It, like you said, it comes every year. And then, as I said, it's the only 3 seasons we got in Florida: hurricane season, preparing for hurricane season, and after hurricane season. That's it.
Yeah, I think one of the other pieces of that too is going to be keeping your insurance information handy, right before a storm. Make sure you have your claims phone number for your home insurance, for your car insurance, so that you can call those claims in. The faster you get to making those claims, the quicker, in a sense, you should be to getting your home and everything repaired or restored. So that's another one.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for filling in for Eric. You look just like him today, so it'll be great. We'll go from there. There you go.
Yeah.
Now you look like him. All right, everybody. Thanks.